Here's some misunderstood films for you. It's a classic from Brian De Palma, written by Oliver Stone. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
The film basically follows a Cuban drug lord immigrant to become the biggest drug smuggler in Miami. For some perplexing reason, drug lord Tony Montana in this film has become idolized in certain circles. These individuals tend to like mentally block out the last 20 minutes of the movie, which the movie is basically the rise and fall of Tony Soprano. Tony Montana. The Sopranos is another one, though. We'll get into that. Firstly, Tony Montana doesn't give a shit about anybody in this movie. He kind of cares about his sister, but he ends up pretty much marginalizing her at the end. Combination of like there's like that badass line, right? The say hello to my little friend.
Yeah.
That's, iconic at this point. And it basically creates like an admiration for the character, but that's not really the point of that film. The last 20 minutes of the movie are basically him slipping into madness and just a cocaine driven madness at that.
Almost every single guy I went to high school with in Idaho owned a Scarface sweatshirt and had that poster on their wall.
The thing is that people are blinded by the performance, although Al Pacino is Italian playing a Cuban guy, but they're blinded by the intensity of the performance, basically. And yeah, it's supposed to be a dark comedy. Brian De Palma kind of talks about how it's a bit of a parody or a dark comedy mirroring just like the greediness of Wall Street. There's a really cool kind of article I read. There's a writer named Lisa Marie Bowen, and I'm gonna quote her on this. They miss the fact that Scarface is also an extremely dark comedy. It satirizes the excess of the 80s. Once Tony reaches the top of the underworld, he becomes a parody of the nouveau rich. Tony reached the top of his profession just to discover it takes more than a living tiger and a wardrobe of wide lapelled suits to achieve true happiness.
And Michelle Pfeiffer.
And Michelle Pfeiffer is stunning in that movie. But clearly that character is not happy. This is what's weird about Scarface is a lot of people will talk about Scarface with this like hustler mentality. Like,
that's what they think. They think that he like rose to the top and now he can do all the cocaine and have all the money. And that's like the end of the story for them. And it's like, oh, I don't think you watched it.
Once more, I blame it on the cool one-liners of Oliver Stone's writing, because there's that line of like, first you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the women, right?
I try to tell you, but you don't listen. Yeah. Look at you now, you stupid fuck. That's my favorite part. So good. That's the best part.
It's extremely quotable, but the character's not happy. Even like, so if you're not talking about drug lord, but like that over workaholic mentality, although it buys you monetary success, doesn't buy you happiness or true success, right? Which is, I guess, the content of your character, what the legacy that you leave behind, the relationships that we create. Tony Montana is not a role model.
No. I have another one. I don't know if it's on your list or not.
Yeah,
go through your list.
No, I mean, you can go. I mean,
Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah. Belfleur, right?
Yeah, Jordan Belfleur
is not. Yeah, he's
not a good guy.
He's not a good guy.
Like when I watched that movie, I was like, I didn't like it. Like I did not like that movie, and I love Martin Scorsese, but I just thought like the lesson really didn't come into play. So for me, when I was watching it, I was like, it kind of feels like you're kind of glamorizing it in a way, like throughout the whole movie. And it's very funny. And I also think it's another like satire take on things.
Absolutely.
It's definitely a satire, but
it's done for sure. Like, look, so many things can be traced back to where we're at today because of the excess insanity of the 80s.
Yes, definitely. And it's like heavily inspired by American Psycho.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't over the top enough for me to be like, oh, that's like satire and that's that is like making fun of that, or that's like degrading that, like in the way it does American Psycho. It was just like, no, all these things actually happened, and then people are like rooting for this guy and love this guy.
Yeah, he got big on TikTok.
Huge. And people like really look up to him. I'm like, is that what we were trying to do with that movie? Like, I didn't get it.
No,
I didn't get it. So I'm one of the
people out of a lot of money.
Yeah, not a good guy.
Not a good guy. You did a bunch of debaucherous awful shit and created extremely toxic culture.
Yeah. So when that movie came out, it was like the same kind of thing of people just idolizing that guy and being like Scarface. It felt like a new age Scarface.
But yeah, and then that's the interesting thing about it being a real character.
A real guy. And
is-
like still alive and like kind of like young still right now.
Yeah, well, it goes to show that like some people of you reach a certain like social stature or like a level of monetary gain or just like some sort of like wage that a lot of that dude should be put away for a long ass time, right? But he's now still probably finding a lot of success and winning, right? As still probably at the expense
That's
of
what's
other
annoying
people.
about it, because he's like a real guy and people watch the movie and they're like, it's so funny. And I was like, it is funny, but it's also serious. And this guy exists. And now he's idolized by a gang of young men who are young boys at the time. And now they're like men in our society. Like,
Yeah,
that's kind of scary.
it is scary. You're right. And you're right.
Didn't get it. They didn't get it.
No, they didn't get it. They just thought, oh my gosh, how fun it's got to be to have that much money. And
yeah. And now that guy, like, I mean, he was ostracized before that movie came out, and now he's just like famous as ever. And he's like out there just being kind of the same guy he always was, and everybody fucking loves him.
The next movie on my list, this is the David Fincher classic. I'm guilty. I had this poster in my room, and as a young man, for sure, there was a lot of misinterpretation. Fight Club. Fight Club has become a quintessential guy flick. It's a male-centric film whose posters are bound to decorate the student bedroom walls until forever. The movie is visually brilliant, and it does have a really compelling story, but it is basically about guys suffering from depression and clearly an intense mental disorder.
Schizophrenia.
Yeah, schizophrenia. I'm going to quote Zach Sharf from Variety on this one. This is the poll I got from Variety. Fight Club has become a favorite amongst incels and far-right groups for depicting disenfranchised white men coming together to rally against capitalist society. The director distanced himself from such a topic, telling the publication, I'm not responsible for how people interpret things. Language evolves, symbols evolve. The director, by the way, David Fincher, also went on to say, it's impossible for me to imagine that people don't understand that Tyler Durden is a negative influence. Yeah, look, this is what's tough, especially like as we're having this conversation is David Fincher's right. Symbols evolve, and they can turn into a negative thing. It's like Roman salutes can turn into negative things, and we should all be very aware of those sort of things. There was another article here from Rebecca Rayner that says the books that we read, The Great Gatsby, Death of a Salesman, sold us the dream that was broken, but it was Fight Club that showed us that the dream was a lie in the first place. Instead of
I like that.
Instead of consumeristic culture, MRA Fight Club fanboys want power, silent women, and wait for it, the American dream, just by another name. They're a bunch of rule followers trying to remake the world in the way that's always been told it should be. That's how they see themselves, right? As like the people following the rules, like, I'm doing all the right things.
Why am I not being rewarded?
What's going on? That's a really cool article from LitHud, by the way. Fucking Brad Pitt's body fat percentage, insane. I get it. He creates a pretty cool character, but
he's not real.
Yeah.
So it's
he's
like,
also not real.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah, he's like the representation of the Edward Norton's character,
Right.
the narrator, right? To be like what guys think is cool.
And that's not up for debate. Like, that's literally what it was. Like in American Psycho, it's like, oh, did he do those things? Did he not do those things? That's just like a fun thing when you're talking about that story. But I've heard people kind of bring that up with Fight Club, and I'm like, no, that's not ever in question. Like, Tyler Durden's not real.
Look, like I said, it's a well-made film. Like the attention to detail. Fincher is probably one of the greatest directors of our era.
And to take that book and make it into a film is crazy, because the book is so abstract. Like all of his books are so in your head, like I didn't even know where he was going to start making the movie, and then he did it. He did the damn thing. It was so good, but very misunderstood by people.
Extremely misunderstood. Writer Rebecca Renna actually pulled the quote from the book, which I loved. I've met God across his long walnut desk with his diplomas hanging on the wall behind him. And God asks me, why? Why did I cause so much pain? Didn't I realize that each of us is a sacred, unique snowflake of special, unique specialness? Can't I see how we're all manifestations of love? I look at God behind his desk, take notes on a pad, but God's got this all wrong. We are not special. We're not crap or trash either. We just are. We just are. And what happens just happens. And God says, no, that's not right. Yeah, well, whatever. You can't teach God anything.
It's funny.
I love this because it's saying, like, we just are, and let's just be and not focus on what we perceive masculinity to have to be, or femininity for that matter. You know what I'm saying? Like any of those kind of constructs. It's just be a person. I don't know.
And a good one.
If you can. Always do your best.
Mm-hmm.
That's key, right? We're not all perfect. We can always try to do our best. The other thing about this discussion is like, hey, I'm not here to shame anybody that maybe does interpret these things, but maybe it's
I am.
But how you have the opportunity to rewatch it, hopefully with a fresh perspective. And like, look, I love The Sopranos. Sopranos is my Roman Empire. It is. I think about The Sopranos on a daily basis. I rewatch the series sometimes twice a year. I'm obsessed, but Tony Soprano is not a character that should be idolized. The Sopranos is a dark comedy, and there's funny moments. But what I love about David Chase, and this is why I think season 3 has some of the most interesting, compelling stuff, or even I think season 1 with the college episode. Yeah, Tony Soprano is like a family man. He does all the things that you think a good father would do, taking care of his family, trying to raise his kids, trying to do like the right thing. There's even like a quote in the show talking about, he's like, I don't think I'm going to go to hell because we're soldiers. Soldiers kill other soldiers in war, but soldiers, don't go to hell for being soldiers. And that's how they consider themselves. And it's a play on morality and like being morally ambiguous. But Tony Soprano is evil. He is not a good person.
Mm-hmm.
He is not a good character. And it kind of even harkens back a little bit. There's another line from the My Friend Dahmer graphic novel where they talk about, it's like, hey, Jeffrey Dahmer was a monster. But don't empathize with Jeffrey Dahmer.
Mm-hmm.
Pity Jeffrey Dahmer, right? Because we can feel pity for people who are not, in their right mind, but don't empathize with him, because at the end of the day, he's a monster. And Tony Soprano, you shouldn't be seeing yourself in Tony, because the whole show is pretty much about toxic men not taking accountability. Every character on that show takes no accountability for anything. If you've noticed that theme throughout Sopranos, nobody on that show takes accountability for any of the shit that they do. They always fucking somehow blame it, like the entire series. But it's one of those things that
there's another show that I just thought of that I think is wildly misunderstood. Weeds. Did you guys watch Weeds?
I remember Weeds.
I didn't watch it.
It's about her losing her morality.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
And just like becoming a super bad person. And we're like you're watching it, like each episode, like you just see her go down this path of like losing everything about herself that makes her herself. And I think when people were watching it, they were like, "Oh, she's a weed dealer."
Did that come out before Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
Because it's basically Breaking Bad.
Oh yeah, I never watched Breaking Bad, but
it's
the
Weeds.
Same. It's Weeds.
Yeah,
It's about
Weeds.
somebody. Well, I think in Weeds, her husband dies.
Yeah, and she has to
sell
make
weed
money somehow.
To make money. Breaking Bad is he's gonna die and he wants to leave his family with a good nest egg.
Yeah.
Right.
Holy shit! We just put this together in real time. Breaking Bad and Weeds are the same show, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, y'all.
And I remember because I was watching it when it was coming out like each week, and I remember going to school and hearing people being like, oh, you see that episode? And I'm like, yeah, dude, Nancy Botwin like fucking sucks. And they're like, she's the best. And I'm like, what? No, that's not what it's about. It's about her like becoming terrible. Like, this is not, what are you watching? She wants to make money for her family, but as the show progresses, that part doesn't matter to her at all anymore. But that's a lie she keeps telling to herself. But she keeps putting her family in more and more and more in danger until they start becoming terrible people too. It's a very dark show.
So this brings us to our final discussion point here. American Psycho definitely is one of those movies, right? That is, and I fell down a rabbit hole on this one because I do love American Psycho actually, and I feel like Christian Bale actually said it the best in one of the interviews. Because the guy interviewing was like, what do you like the most about Patrick Bateman? He's like, what do I like?
Nothing.
What do I like the most about him? He's like, yeah, what do you like the most about him? He's like, well, like nothing. He's not a likable character. What makes him entertaining is X, Y, and Z, right? And he's like, I wouldn't want to sit at a table and have dinner with him, but I would love to be at a table eavesdropping, across from him kind of thing. Right. And currently live in a state where maybe we could find certain things about a person's character entertaining because yes, they are, but it doesn't make an individual necessarily good or likable.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound like
something that's happening right now? Yeah.
Not likable, not good, but very entertaining. Written by Bret Easton Ellis, American Psycho was initially considered unfilmable because of its extreme violence and graphic sexual content. The novel has sparked controversy since its release in 1991, yet producer Edward R. Pressman acquired the film rights a year later and was eager to have it adapted. Now, what's interesting about this, Mary Herron wrote it with Genevieve Turner. It was good that you had that because they brought out the fact that the book was a comedy. It doesn't always translate in text, right?
They really did a good job adapting it. They did a really good job with the satire in the film.
Yeah, it is complete satire. And then the ending. They were talking about like the end because you were saying you're like, oh, they leave it ambiguous. Did he do it? Did he not do it? Right. And that's like the always thing is like, do you think it actually happened?
Yeah.
Right. Is the discussion usually when people talk about that film.
Yeah. But they don't ever talk about the other stuff. They just talk about if he did it or not.
And that's the problem.
And that's the whole thing too. It's like, that's all people care about, but no one is sitting there talking about like, oh, this is like a take on toxic masculinity and about capitalism and about the absurdity of it all. And, it's super interesting.
It is. That's what they're saying. They're like, that shouldn't be the discussion. Even Bret Easton Ellis was talking about. He's like,
guys,
I didn't write it.
Did he do it?
That's what they're saying. They're like, the ending really doesn't matter to that film.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But I don't. I think Mary Herron talked about that. She's like, I think he did do it.
No, okay, and I also
There's a lot of theories.
I went down a rabbit hole myself.
Okay.
And I saw these podcasters. I'm not sure of the name of their podcast or even who they are. Should have wrote that down maybe. But they were talking about how in it throughout the entire thing, nobody knows who like each other is, and they don't recognize each other. They don't pay like throughout the movie. He'll be mistaken for like the Jared Leto character.
Yeah, they all get mistaken for one another.
And they all don't.
Same asshole.
They all don't care like what the people that they're talking to every single day look like. They're just seeing themselves like projected back into themselves. So everybody's like, no, I had dinner with that guy last week, or I had dinner with him last night. I think is like the thing that is everyone's like, oh, he didn't do it,
Yeah.
But I do think this is what I think, actually. Okay. Having read the book and having seen the film and now reading this comic, but I didn't read much of the comic and they don't get into it to the point where I got to. But I think he did kill those people, but I do also think that he's having like a psychotic break
episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's things that he does, like where he shoots the cop car and it explodes. And it's like, and he even looks at the gun like, why would that happen? I don't think that was real. And obviously, I don't think an ATM machine said, feed me a stray cat.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's part of his psychosis, but I do think he's actually killing people.
Yeah.
And I don't think that any of the guys he works with fucking even know each other's names. So I think that's why they're like, no, that guy's alive. What?
He's not meant to be a reliable narrator. Right? He's narrating the entire thing, basically. This theme of it is corporate callousness. There's people that you see in the world today that are awful, and you're entertaining because you make for great TV and you make for great art and parody and things of that nature, but you're not necessarily a good person.